So where are we on 111?
111. So based on the timelines, the asynchronous first week and second week testing is done. However, there are still 4 test cases left. So there are 2 possibilities. Either we can wait to automate or test them, given that the testing week is done. So my question is, what should we do at this point, given the automation is not completed? And they are P0s.
When is the freeze?
Freeze is on 3rd. If you look at the next, yeah. So if you click on that, yeah, I filtered that already. It should only view the 4 which are left.
Oh, I can't switch with the way I'm presenting the tab.
No, I was about to say so, and I don't know if you have presented.
All right, let me try this again. Hold on. That's really annoying the way they have this set up.
Are you presenting the tab?
Yeah, I'll change it and see if I can do present. Nah, it's gotta be tab. Okay. Yeah.
So it should, if you click on the needs automation tab, this is the last one. Oh, I had filtered it. Okay. Somebody changed the filters.
So now there's more than 4 here.
One comment from my side. There are some issues that are in P0, for example, that are there for like a long time, since 1.7. And the only changes we see in the ticket is changing milestone from 1.7 to 1.8, then 1.8 to 1.9. So it doesn't make sense to have such issues in P0. If they are pushed so many ways, they are not actually P0s, right? So we had a meeting this morning with the other release managers, and we are going to start triaging those issues, asking if there are really issues at all, or we can just remove the milestone field from them, because it doesn't make sense for us.
So John, are you talking about the test cases, or are you talking about the actual bugs?
I'm talking about this prioritization board, where we can see there is a release blocker column, there is a P0. It's GitHub, it's not spreadsheets.
The project.
Yes. So there are issues in P0, issues in P1 that are not really that important from our understanding. So it's just clutter.
Are any of these 4 in that category?
Oh, we're mixing 2 things. I think John's talking about GitHub issues, which perfectly valid, and these are docs tests. So
yeah, that's why I asked John. So what John is talking about is the next topic, Swain, which is actual bugs of 1.111 milestone.
Okay, yeah. So let's hold off on that until we understand what we're doing with these 4. Right?
Yeah.
So visualizing your mesh, Ed has looked at it in the past, and it's dealing more with the GUI, which is a different way of testing. So I think we should manually test that one. But the other 3, I mean, we should be able to automate more easily. Whether we want to do that this release, I'm not sure.
Do we have the working group leads of these groups, if they can help us discuss if they can automate it or manually test it?
Yeah, I can speak up for user experience. Shweta, as we discussed when these were handed out, user experience doesn't have any capacity to do tests this cycle. Ed is out on vacation, and I am working on a Google launch pretty much 100% of my time.
Can someone remind me, P0 means release block, still means release block, or it means P0 still means everything is P0, or you know, we wishful thinking, or what? Because
the way we are looking at the docs testing P0 for us as release blockers, we have marked the ones which have not changed in the past or not visited a lot as P1s.
So we are not going to launch the next release until those 4 are resolved? I mean, that seems...
I don't agree with that. We need to test them. We don't need to automatically test them. Like, it doesn't make sense to block the release of Istio because we haven't automated some test about Kiali. We can say we can block it until someone goes and manually does it, but we don't need to automate it. We should automate it, of course. Like, it is high priority, but it's not blocking.
So John, what we are really looking for, if we can't automate, then someone to help manual test. We're not blocking, but it's blocked if they are not tested.
Yeah, that's fine. But someone manually testing it takes 5 minutes. So that's I wouldn't get too hung up on that.
All right. So can we get volunteers to manually test these if they're not being automated? But someone's working on the first one, supposedly.
First
one, I don't think should be P0, but
and it's tested extensively, by all kind of integration tests. I mean, it's not the docs, but
no, this is just about the docs custom.
Yeah, I know.
The docs accurate.
And to clarify, this is a P0 because it's one of the pages visited most in Istio.
Well, that's kind of a bug on our search engine optimization because that one should not be the most visited page. That's like in this weird learning microservices using Kubernetes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I can't believe that would be the most visited page because it's really under this particular example, which we don't have automated testing yet.
Yeah, so if that's the most visited, then people are landing on the wrong page when they're supposed to be getting to the ingress gateway task.
Yeah, in fact, this page is probably outdated, right? It doesn't use like gateway injection.
So maybe the fix will be to remove this page and redirect to the real page, because if people are confused, I mean, that's probably not the best doc anyway.
Yeah. So looking at this, I mean, this page had 2,000 accesses in a month. 2,229.
Brian, what are the referrals for that? Are they coming from elsewhere on the Istio site, or is it a landing page from search?
I'm not sure, and I don't know if the eng.istio.io gives that information, but...
Okay, I can dig into it on my side.
Thanks.
So Brian, do you know how many visitors on our Istio ingress gateway page on the install? Because I really would hope that would be higher.
So all of that is in the spreadsheet. It's just filtered out. The last column shows the number of page hits over a month for every one of these pages.
Okay, yeah, I see it now. Okay, so I saw some of the pages, like it's still Kado, right? It has like a 11K, which is much higher. And the proxy, the debugging command, it has 4,000. So it's also higher, which makes sense. So this page is about the same number of users visiting like the Cert Manager page for us. So 2,000 is probably the lowest on the few one I looked at.
Yeah, so I set the threshold for P0s at 2,000 hits. There was a long tail that had like 0 hits, 1 hit for a month, and then like 60 that had over 2,000, and then everything else fell in somewhere in between.
And I have another question about the last one. That's envoy filter based. Are we treating envoy filter documentations as P0s or especially since the new API is in discussion?
Yeah, we should not actually, as in. So I guess this gives us a signal that it's being visited and it's important. Yeah. People want the function, but we don't want this particular way of using it, and we would much rather prefer the actual API.
I'd argue that for this release, I mean, that's what we're offering for the implementation of that feature. So we should at least make sure it works.
At like 6, so.
Or maybe put some warnings there that it's, it may work, but it's something that will break very soon and is not supported anyway. I mean, it's alpha feature, so if you use it in production. Who knows?
Yeah, all the envoy filter are alpha, right? The problem is we don't have an alternative yet. The rate limiting API is not going to land in this release. So, I mean, they know it's alpha.
No, I don't think it's a page doesn't make it very clear that, I mean, looking at the page, I don't see anywhere that, this is an alpha API is not going to be supported. I mean, it's very, looks like a supported feature to me. I don't know, maybe I'm reading it wrong and it's somewhere.
Austin, I think I think we are mixing 2 or 3 things, right? The state of the feature can be alpha or experimental, that's fine. But whatever you document, it better work, right?
Agreed, but the documentation should make it clear that it's an alpha feature because the way I
That's
read
fair.
it the page. It's
That's fair. But I think Brian was saying if this doesn't work, then we should just remove the page.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty bad without an alternative.
I mean,
I agree.
this is our rate limiting implementation right now. This is what our users are trying to use if
Yeah,
they use
exactly.
rate limiting with Istio.
Right. And
Yes,
we have tests that actually test this. So it's not just going to directly break.
Well, I want
But
to go to
yeah,
mini,
there is a doc test.
and
So.
yeah,
But
mini
it does sound like we don't want to
Mini,
automate
I know there's a
this
water
or
polo team
missing
there,
it,
so
right? So maybe we just need
yeah.
Mandar someone to
Mhm.
Yeah,
test it.
to verify
So
that.
I'll get in. That's
works.
the thing.
Yes, please.
Yep.
and please update the document. It would
Yeah,
be great
exactly.
to say that it's alpha and it'll be replaced and be more warningy, even if it works perfectly.
Community service,
Okay.
what is it now?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And what about the one above it, the visualizing your mesh one?
So the
Mandar, sorry, go ahead.
The challenge with this one is it's the Kiali GUI, which, I mean, a lot of people use to debug Istio, but it's not as easy to test as, say, running a kubectl command. So, I mean, this one kind of needs manual testing.
Okay, so this is Kiali specific.
And to confirm,
It seems a little weird to have a Kiali specific one as a P0, but I guess it's because there's a lot of people are using it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that one has, I don't know, 4,503 hits in a month.
does Kiali has its own tests and documentations about this? I mean, it sounds like they should. I'm saying, should we link to them? Because probably they have an equivalent page there somewhere.
Link to them instead of providing our own documentation. Is that your suggestion?
Yeah, I mean, it's a project. I mean, they have for Prometheus how to install and some other things. We generally try to link to.
Yeah,
It's not,
potentially.
I think that's a reasonable suggestion. If they have, I mean, they have their own guides.
Let me follow up on that offline. I'm a little worried on our agenda for sort of time.
Okay.
Shweta, is the next area the GitHub issues that are open?
Yeah, but do we have an answer of what's happening with these ones? Is anybody taking to test? I just still want to make sure we do have owners.
I think we're saying we don't want to automate the last one. And probably not visualizing your mesh either. We need someone to help try out the debugging envoy in the COD one.
I can own finding someone to own all 4 of these.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
So you have to flip the tab again.
Yeah, I'm doing it. 1 second.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so just a reminder that the 3rd August is the code freeze. So if anything is to emerge, please do so. On the release update, so that's where John Wendell was talking about. We still have release blocker, 10 P0s and 15 P1s. So John, if you're still on. Oh yeah, you may have to switch back again.
No, we talked this morning. about those issues, and we are going to triage them.
Okay.
There are some. I mean, there are some stuff that I don't really understand. So we had the branch cut probably 2 weeks ago, and we are still seeing features being cherry picked to 111. So we should communicate better that okay, feature is over, unless you have an exception or it's a critical feature. So that's what we are seeing right now. So we are seeing cherry picks of features, and I'm asking for an explanation why this should go into 111. We don't have expertise in all areas, so we should ask the team leads or the working group leads for exceptions. So we are just trying to stabilize the release, because if we are keeping adding features, then we are going to open the door for more bugs, right? But yeah, that's it. That said, there's a release blocker that John created that's supposed to go through the Envoy changelog and see if there is anything that could break us. Ryan, the other release manager, asked in the Slack channel for help on this one. Because again, we are not experts, so I'm not able to say whether Envoy change broke Istio, right? So, but that's it. We had 2 betas. There was one critical blocker that was preventing Istio from stalling on OpenShift. That was fixed. That was preventing Kiali guys from testing as well. So that's fixed. We had this beta 2 last Friday, so people have a new version to test on.
So do you need anything from TOC here? Like I think we can help on the making sure if people are trying to get in features that you have backup for saying no. But is there anything else we can do?
I don't think it's TOC. We should probably ask the team leaders, right? Yeah, I don't think TOC is necessary. Thanks for the offering. Yeah.
Jacob, go ahead.
Yeah, so I had proposed this to TOC asked, I think this was like a few months back. It hasn't been approved by the test and release group, but this is something that we should prioritize in test and release. This was around like feature freezing and like what are the expectations. We can revisit this at a later time, but I just want to put it on the radar that this has been a concern before. Release managers do tend to have a hard time kind of reaching out to people and making sure you're hitting the appropriate resource. And then at the end of the day, they have to make a judgment call. And it's easy to accept a PR kind of last minute that can actually maybe cause a slight regression. So please take a look at this, TOC. I'll try to get it approved by TNR tomorrow, and then we'll revisit this soon, because I think this has been frequently occurring. So.
Right, sounds good.
Yeah,
Jacob,
please add it to the agenda.
yeah, I was just going to say, can you add the link here to the docs that we have to review?
Yeah, sure. I'll put this in the. Yeah, I'll do that.
I can do it. Oops. Okay, 112. We have a release manager from Google who is looking for others. Anyone? Maybe that's something we need to bring up in steering more than in TOC. But anyone have volunteers?
We haven't even started discussing this internally yet, so
okay.
We don't have anybody yet.
Okay, let's get to the agenda. Do we want to start with the environments roadmap, or do we have anything quick that we should do beforehand? I'm guessing no. We should probably do that one first, and then whatever time we have left. Who's presenting that?
Yeah, I can present this one.
Okay. Do you want me to go to the thing, or do you want to actually present the page?
It's just like a page of stuff, so I think you can present it.
Okay.
Not much scrolling. Yeah, it's just a section with 112 roadmap. Yeah, so pretty much this for 112, we're looking pretty heavily at promoting existing features, closer to stable, if not too stable. I'll just go one by one through these promotions, kind of discussing what's needed. So first, for revision tags or stable revision labels, we didn't officially introduce the feature at the beginning. So actually later this meeting, I have an item to hopefully get it to alpha. And the things that are remaining are a coherent story on how Helm users should be able to use revision tags and just better documentation in general. Moving on to Helm, we have Jacob and Niraj done a lot of work on this, targeting beta. And yeah, from what I've heard, it's basically just improving the documentation and improving the integration test coverage for Helm stuff. So then multi-cluster, targeting stable for this release. I know Steven has a doc out on that, and he's doing a lot of work on making like a command to be able to view what clusters are a part of your mesh, and some holes in how to upgrade a multi-cluster mesh are being addressed. So that's what's going on there. User gateway management separation. So this is John's work, and it's been getting better and better documentation, and I think just steadily moving forward in stability. MCS, so Kubernetes multi-cluster services, Nathan introduced, I think a few months ago, and it merged into experimental, and I think we're just bringing that to alpha on by default. Not necessarily sure what else is required for MCS. Then the Istio operator. I'm not 100% sure actually what needs to be done here to move it to stable. It's currently a beta, and Tong volunteered to take a look at this. Along with some help from Martin. Yeah, go ahead, Tong.
Yes, I have talked to Martin and also talked to John about this. We're gonna have a decision Wednesday, I think, in the environment working group. We're gonna talk about this specifically. We should have a decision what the content should be. So we're gonna report back.
Okay.
And for TOC, the main issue is that the API of the operator itself, it's alpha and cannot become anything but alpha because it's basically mesh config and a lot of things that are deprecated. So it will be very tricky to have a stable feature with APIs that are going away.
Right, constant. Yeah. So we're gonna talk about that. That's the specific issue, the API stuff. Yeah.
Isn't in-cluster operator already beta?
Yeah, it's already beta.
It's really the mesh config stuff.
It's beta.
So I think it's very.
API.
Yeah, so I think it's really tricky to call it stable with alpha API, especially the API. I think costing you re-innovate with proxy config, be its own CRD, and the mesh config remains within the config map.
Remains, but it's going to be empty because, I mean, mostly empty because telemetry is moving to proper CRDs. The Almost everything in mesh config is supposed to be promoted to proper features. So operator will eventually be an empty API because it just works and you use Istio APIs to configure whatever you need to configure.
Great. Do we feel comfortable with the stable? I guess it would be part of your document. What are the criteria to promote your stable? With a lot of moving parts, which could impact users' operator YAML file.
Yeah, I'm not even with that. I'm not comfortable, but I was not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. This whole requirement of anything that relies on mesh config cannot be beta. I mean, I understand the philosophy of this, but it feels like many of our features are like that right now. Isn't multi-cluster also require something from mesh config?
I don't think multi-cluster has any specific dependency on mesh config. It depends on the secrets, which are also kind of weird. But
okay, I just want to make sure we are thinking about this correctly in general. If we want to follow this principle, we should make sure we are consistent across the board and not just have one feature bogged down by.
I completely agree, but reality is that we cannot. I mean, if it's alpha, and especially if it's a method that is in mesh config, because the review bar for values.yaml and mesh config has been traditionally low, and it's not clear we can support them as stable.
Got it.
I mean, we're already in this state, right? It's not like this is a new thing, given that operator is beta and API is alpha.
Yeah,
I think it's probably okay. It's not great. I think we need to, have environments put more effort here on getting us out of this mess of mesh config and right. Like we need to get to a point where we are happy with our APIs. So I think as long as that's on the roadmap, continuing to move forward on getting us out of the mess, that's good.
We are working, but it's not environment working group. It's each other working groups that needs to have their stuff, proper APIs. I mean, telemetry, it's in progress. Security, we need to do some work as well.
Yeah, that's true, but environments needs to be the leaders here.
Oh yeah, no, we are pushing as hard as we can, but and we have proxy config in the agenda, and mesh config is next, but
yeah. Okay.
We already, at least for IPv6 and the feature status, call out the exceptions. So, part of what we can do is communicate that better to our users. Of, hey, this is beta and here's the exception.
Yeah. Well, let's say I had a long email thread from a user last week about this exact question. They're like, "Can I use operator? Can I trust it? It's alpha. Is it going to change? Is everything going to break? Do you fix security bugs in it?" So I think we need to be clearer about like, yes, the actual code base is good and production usable. It's just we're going to change the API. So yeah, that's enough on that. But yeah, please help us get out of this mess.
Yeah. So I just want to say one last thing. In fact, most of the things on this list, if I look at the documentation, they have somewhere or other mentioned mesh config. Like external Istio is another example. You look at the documentation, it has mesh config in it. So I really don't know how can these get promoted. I mean, do we want more things in that state, or do we block things unless we resolve the mesh config promotion?
promotion to what? I mean, we cannot promote
whatever
what I meant is
whatever the new API is, right? I mean, like, we can't just hold everything in place because, we have been talking about mesh config for the past 1.5 years. Some of these features have to progress. That's why I keep
the
bringing it up.
issue is not just that it's labeled alpha for the Istio operator. It's the API itself is no longer a good API. It was, designed before Istio D. And so it's more than just the stability label. Whereas mesh config, like, it's not perfect, but there's no, fundamental issues with it. Like we just stick a bunch of configs in there, it's fine. But the Istio operator API is fairly flawed and confusing right now. So like, regardless of the label, that's not something that I would want to promote more because we have a lot of issues with it.
But I don't think anyone's for arguing for or moving the operator API to something beyond alpha, right? I think
Exactly.
the question is, can we mark the like in cluster operator as stable, but it's still using an alpha API? Is that okay?
John, I have to disagree with you about mesh config. I mean, mesh config is not good because almost everything is deprecated. I mean, telemetry, if we call it betas and telemetry, it's already deprecated. And telemetry is more than half of the mesh config.
This churn on users and toil is not good. Like, we keep swapping and changing things from underneath them every few releases. And if in-cluster operator was the way of doing things few releases ago, now it looks like it's no longer that thing. We are never planning to promote it. So that signals to the user they shouldn't be using it, right?
I think it's just the API we don't like. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, John and Costin, but I don't think we're saying the model is wrong. We're saying the API is wrong.
So having a chart that installs an operator installs default Istio, these are reasonable. I don't see a problem with that. As long as we don't have the API, basically. It's just an empty, and then you use mesh config as a config map, which you support, and you can edit the config map at runtime.
Okay, so
yeah,
the
I
API,
do have some
which is
concerns about the actual implementation, but I feel like we can take it to the environments meeting. And I guess the action item for the roadmap is figure out the future of the operator and then maybe start down that path once we have consensus.
Well, and especially the API.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I can put one more thing, for Helm v3 we discussed what kind of API surface we have, which is basically values.yaml in case of Helm. Operator, we also need to consider how we harmonize it, because we want if Helm supports a set of options as values.yaml for Helm, the installation of operator should have probably identical API or as close as possible, because there is another API implicit in Helm v3.
All right, Sam, do you want to keep going?
So external STOD, Frank has been doing a lot of work on this, as well as Eric, getting integration tests into shape and refactoring our charts to be less confusing with external STOD. And yeah, there's a lot of forward progress. And from the last time I synced up, we're targeting beta. So.
And we're also discussing folding external STOD into standard STOD, considering just an extra parameter when you install standard STOD. Is not something special.
I did also have an agenda item on here to propose actually doing this external SD promotion to beta in 1.11. I think functionally it's pretty much there. It's a little light on testing, but 1.12 is the alternative. But if possible, I'm thinking it's close to ready for 1.11 actually. But maybe these API issues we're talking about are showstoppers. But functionally, I think it's pretty good. Like I had a lot of help in the last couple of months from John and Stephen, and I think we've got stuff looking pretty good in terms of the implementation. And there are tests. It's just probably, but I was thinking for beta, it's ready. But anyway, we can talk about that if we have time. I can show you specifically what I had in mind on that.
You already had that on the roadmap for 1.11, right?
Not sure if it was. I think
it was, but we decided to push it to 1.12.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you want to, if you're pretty much convinced that there's show-stopping issues, why you want to leave it for 1.12. Like I said, I'm thinking functionally, I feel pretty good at that it's kind of good and it's there. So
let's say that. Let's get through this, and then I think you said, Frank, that you had that on the agenda.
I had that on the agenda. Yeah, if we have time.
Revisit it. Okay.
Okay. the next thing. So out of the feature promotions and onto kind of new work, the mesh config cleanup. So there's been a lot of discussion on that. Costin's pretty much owning the effort. And Costin, do you want to talk about what's required for 112? What you're planning on?
Yeah, I think we already covered quite a bit in the previous discussion on mesh config. Proxy config is the first step, then probably 113 will be that. I mean, we're waiting for stuff to go out of mesh config so we can deprecate pretty much everything.
Okay. Yeah, the next thing is been kind of pushed back for a while, but I'm hoping to get to it this time. It's cross-version testing. So pretty much the test framework has support built in for testing the compatibility of revisions on different versions. We use that test framework support internally to test compatibility, but we haven't done some of the work needed to actually deploy old versions of Istio into like in CI and run the tests. So hoping to get at least a basic n-2 to n cross-version test in CI this for 112. Yeah, and then there's default revision. So this is something that's been discussed a lot the last few months. So basically it solves or offers a solution to the problem of validation with multiple revisions. There's a lot of like tricky cases with it where you don't necessarily want every revision to perform validation on every resource. So you need some kind of a mechanism to decide which revision ends up validating. So there's a design out for that. There's an implementation that's pretty close to being merged. I'm going to present that to UX as well, and hopefully we can get that well documented and with all the kinks ironed out by 112. And then moving on, we also have eventing. So this is also, I don't understand everything about this item, but my understanding is it's basically making IstioD publish NAC and ACK events. Yeah, I don't know, Costin, do you want to?
Yeah, no, we discussed in the past, we had a design discussed. Right now it's difficult to integrate and to get debug information from IstioD because logs are logs, but people have difficulty reading logs. And we want to have a structured way to report events out of IstioD. And starting with NACs, because that's probably the most important thing that happens in IstioD.
So is this to help user when they run describe command on our Istio resources? They will be able to
It's more to
find out information.
That can be used for this, but it's more for tooling that integrate with IstioD. So, for example, you can specify that all NACs or all important events from IstioD are published to a pub subsystem, and then you have some tools that is posting them to Slack or to Google Chat or some other system. Because once you publish to a pub subsystem, there are integration points where you can integrate with all kinds of other systems that alert or do some stuff. I mean, count them, do smart things about it. Need the infrastructure so IstioD can publish this information in a structured format, and then let other people deal with the rest.
Okay, so it's more like operator of IstioD and then be able to forward the logs to the log system, but not really help service owner to debugging their issues with virtual service.
We could have a tool, for example, that is, for example, one thing I had in mind is to use, for example, PubSub in the case of Google or some other system, and then have a debug tool that is just watching the events and subscribing to the topic and it's displaying any ACK, NAC, or other events that is happening.
Okay.
And also, publish to a chat, basically chat room.
Mm-hmm. If I think you had some RFP or RFC for it.
Yes.
So I would recommend if you can add some user issues, conversations, whatever, where people are specifically asking for things like this, because I haven't come across it. I know it is a useful thing to have, but in terms of prioritization, that would help, right? Are people actually waiting for it? They really want it, or some of the other things much higher in the priority list?
So this whole thing started with external Istio, where it is difficult to get information about connected implement PS, basically Istio PS, because you don't have a direct connection to Istio. And also when you have a distributed system where you have multi-clusters and multiple Istio running in different clusters, PS doesn't actually work very well today because you cannot really connect to all Istio. And there is no other way that I know to implement this today that we found. That's kind of the only implementation we found. If someone has a different implementation or a better implementation, I'm happy to look at it. And so it's internal need basically for people using these kind of scenarios.
Got it. Okay. I mean, yeah, let's talk later. I mean,
sure.
We can also think about if this is something that the community has to provide, or this is something done via some other managed control planes or some other system that does it, right?
Yep.
No, I think there's already an early version of it merged, right?
Yes, there is an early version that is reporting the events to XDS, using XDS as a transport. And it's a pretty trivial implementation, really. I mean, our point of view is just using some HTTP post and some configuration using CNCF eventing. That was the initial proposal. So it's not a lot of code in Istio side. It's just integration with some external system. And then we can let everything else to community and to other systems to deal with it.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's the whole agenda, or the whole roadmap anyway.
So I have one quick comment on the mesh config cleanup and just generally other cleanups of that type. Let's try to figure out what our migration story will be as part of the work. So not just define the new APIs, but figure out how we're going to migrate all the users from the current ones. And ideally, the answer is not like make them do a ton of work, right? We should think about how we can help them and can we automate some of this and things like that. To Neeraj's point about churn on users, right? We need to figure out how to reduce that.
And then to add to your point, the current plan for mesh config proxy config is to support mesh config RCTs and proxy for a very, very, very long time, basically. So we are not planning to remove stuff.
Yeah, but sure, that's okay. I'd also like us to help them move to the right.
Absolutely.
The more we help them move, the less long we actually need to keep it around, right? Cool. All right, thank you, environments. Mitch, you want to talk about Istio extended support?
Yes, if you want to share that, that's great, or I can share my screen, either way. So a little bit of background. Back in May, we moved to support users upgrading from 1.8 to 1.10. We call this direct Istio upgrades across multiple minor versions. It's something that we had been talking about for a while, but had been hesitant to do because the rate of change is so high and testing was difficult. But Sam did a great job testing these what were previously called skip version upgrades for us, and we've sort of stabilized to the point where it's viable for our users. So that's great. These upgrades have been the #1 most requested upgrade-related feature in our upgrade survey in both 1.9 and 1.10. So it's great that we're meeting our users where they're at and helping them to upgrade less frequently. The downside is Istio 1.8 and Istio 1.10 were never actually under support simultaneously. So to take advantage of this new feature, a user must allow their Istio installation to lapse in terms of support, which could involve exposing them to CVEs while they're working on the upgrade from 1.8 to 1.10. So this proposal proposes that we extend our support window for each of our releases by 3 months. The net gain for our users is that they only need to upgrade their Istio installation twice a year. And for every, I'm talking particularly about minor version upgrades. I'm not talking about patch upgrades. Those are a different beast. So they only need to do minor version upgrades twice a year. And they have a 3-month window to perform that upgrade in, which our research shows that 6 weeks is about how long, give or take, it takes a lot of our users to qualify a release through all of their different environments and then get it into production. And then a lot of our users will also wait for the first patch release after a minor version is released before they'll even begin qualifying. So that's why the 3-month extension is proposed. Trying to think. Oh, I did want to cover 2 additional things as far as highlights. In order to keep the burden of this at a minimum on the project, because it does mean that there's an extra branch that we have to maintain, I'm proposing that this extended period really only address high impact fixes. And I've left that intentionally vague because I think the release managers and the TOC can make kind of the right decision on the fly for these sorts of patches. And a lot of it depends on how much our users are impacted by a given bug or CVE. The other thing to mention is when I was talking with this change, Eric Van Norman from the Test and Release Group helped me co-author this. And when we took it to the Product Security Working Group, one of the concerns was the PSWG already feels stretched too thin. They don't feel like they have enough people to meet the commitments that they already have. And maintaining an extra branch does represent an expansion of work for them. So I'll call out sort of towards the bottom of your screen. If we approve, if we meet our users where they're at, allow them to upgrade only twice a year, we also need to commit from our companies that are supporting Istio to expand the resources that are available to the PSWG so that they can meet this new commitment.
So that sounds like we're going to need to at least raise this discussion in the steering committee, assuming that, you know, if TOC approves it, right? Like I think it'll be provisional on steering discussion of how to resource it.
Okay.
Go ahead, John and Costin.
Go ahead, Costin.
No, John, go ahead. You're first.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time with how this support, where we don't support it as much as other versions, but we still kind of support it, is going to work, especially when we don't have a concrete definition. Like you've mentioned, we need to staff the PSWG, but are we only fixing security fixes? Like if there's a critical bug in Envoy, are we going to go fix Envoy if it's not security related? That type of thing. So I'm having a hard time like kind of reconciling how users are going to understand that and what we're expected to do, because it's kind of vague right now, but I think it's a very critical point.
Yeah, that's a great point. In talking with you and others in the PSWG, it sounds like already we exercise discretion in what gets backported where. The further we have to backport a fix, the more work it is because the more the code has aged since the fix was created. And so already for each fix, we're sort of making ad hoc decisions of how severe is the bug that we're patching, how important is it to get this fix back to the version. My proposal is only that we would continue that level of discretion. So if it's unclear to users, that's because it's already unclear to users. Does that make sense?
It does, but in some ways it makes it worse because now we're telling them, hey, and we'll probably publicize this a lot. We'll put a blog post back, hey, don't worry, go to 3 versions back. But actually, we're not going to backport any bug fixes because it's too hard, right? It's kind of a bad impression from the user.
I think I was next. I love the idea of having long-term releases. I'm absolutely for it. But not necessarily all releases to be long-term releases. That's my concern, because that is basically unrealistic. It's basically just increasing the amount of work, and so backporting a bug what releases. I don't think we can deal with such much stress. If we do every other release, things may be a bit better, because so let's say 110 is a long-term release, 112 is a long-term release, and so forth. Because at least we have a bit more determinism. And the other one, it's kind of people who want new features.
So Costin, that actually, you and I co-authored the first version of this doc, and it was for every other release to have an extended support window. The feedback that I've heard from various members of the TOC and the community is that would create too much confusion on the part of our customer. And that if we tried to extend it beyond 9 months, like I think the initial proposal was for 12 months on every other release, we end up running out of the support window of some of our downstream dependencies like Envoy, which is important to us.
But that's common to both proposals. So the window is how much as we can support a release based on Kubernetes and everything else. The question is, do we want each release to be a long-term release, or do we want some releases to be long? So basically, you're not proposing long-term releases, you're proposing extending the life of a release.
Exactly.
Which is different than a long-term release, which is basically having some releases that are stable and some releases that are shorter.
That's right. And like I said, I like your idea, but I was not able to build consensus on it. Hearing from a lot of different members around the community, that seemed too confusing for our users.
Lynn, you were next.
Okay, so a quick comment, just wondering, since Kubernetes already moved to every 4 months, since we're talking about overheads of releasing and qualify and also supporting them from product security stance, I was wondering, thoughts, have you considered alternative proposal if we do release every 4 months?
Yeah, Eric did a great job exploring the possibility of releasing every 4 months. Again, that's in the alternatives considered section, and wrote a big table on it. The long and short of it is that Kubernetes now has a trimester release schedule, while Envoy has a quarterly release schedule. Envoy is a far more important dependency to the Istio project in terms of the need to stay in the support window. And so actually, Sven, if you scroll down to the bottom of the document, there's a long table showing various release dates across the 3 projects and how they line up. Oh, in addition to Golang. Moving Istio to a trimester process would really make our Envoy dependency difficult to manage. Some of our releases would run out of Envoy support, while others would ship just before an Envoy release, and therefore sort of miss some of the benefits of that particular release. So that was why we did not propose moving to a 4-month cadence.
Thank you, that was helpful.
Yeah.
Louis, I think you're next.
Yeah, I mean, I think you partially answered the question, Mitch. We are explicitly saying that it's not 3 months, this is n-2. Because if we slip a release by a month, we wouldn't violate the user expectation of 2 release upgrade.
So currently our releases are supported for 1 minor release plus 90 days.
Right.
So I think what I would propose is that we simply term it 2 minor releases plus 90 days. I don't know who was next, but I see hands still up.
I think I was. Yeah, so the few things that I want to mention, because we have been discussing it in product security working group. So Mitch, your concern and the others in the PSWG they raised about backporting and the extra effort it takes is valid on another branch, but for the last few CVEs, we have been doing the work anyways. Most of the vendors have customers who are on these older branches, and we end up patching them. Right? No one moves as quickly as the Istio releases. That's the reality. So in fact, we have been even patching up to like 1.6 or something, even for the latest ones. So,
oh, go ahead, Neeraj.
Oh, no, I was just saying that even though this concern is valid, we are doing the work, so might as well get the benefit of it. Second point before I give it back to you is our process of when a bug gets fixed, even in our supported n-1 release, is really weird right now. Right? It's basically if a customer says, I really need this, it's creating havoc in my cluster, somebody goes and patches it. By default, we don't go ahead and patch every bug, as far as I know. So it feels like that process, even though it's weird, can pretty much continue, like Mitch, you were saying.
Yeah, my intent is not to touch that standard or that process at all. Maybe it needs to be touched and modified. It's possible that we should reconsider it, but my intent is not to address that in this proposal. John, I know you've had some thoughts on what the vendors do with CVEs currently. Did you want to share that?
Yeah, I mean, we do, like, the vendors do patch most of CVEs. There are some differences because it's not always required. Like, if there's a CVE in Istio, we just have to fix it. We can't say that, hey, no one's using this probably. Whereas with us, vendors have more restrictive deployment setups typically. So we can say something like, oh, that was multi-cluster. We don't support multi-cluster. We're not going to bother. But that's probably not a big deal. But I am still concerned, like, I don't know if I agree that we're not making things worse with like the patching, because now we're telling people that it's okay to be on old versions, and there's some expectations with that if we're not very, very clear that it's only like the worst CVEs that we're fixing. Because right now people will either upgrade because they're on an unsupported version, at which point they're getting a bunch of bug fixes, and that's good in the end. Or they're not upgrading, but they at least know, if they're paying any attention at all, that they're not expecting to have bugs fixed, right? I'm worried that people will go on old releases now and expect a lot, when in reality they're not going to get any bug fixes. So our users would, aside from the upgrade part, which is obviously a huge hurdle to get over, our users would almost always be better served by being on new versions, because we have so many more bug fixes. So I'm just worried if we encourage them to be on older versions, that their experience will be worse.
John, what we learned in October, though, is that our users don't actually recognize when they're on unsupported versions of Istio or vulnerable versions of Istio. Today, what we've learned is that our users are running unsupported versions of Istio, but expecting that they have no CVEs and that they can be supported with new patch releases when needed. I couldn't answer the why question there. I think that we had communicated pretty clearly what our support policy is. But the bottom line is our users feel like they should be supported by the community and are not. So this would simply mean those users who are on the 1.9 release in next quarter who feel like they should be supported would actually be supported. There will still be users running 1.8 next year who expect support, and this proposal doesn't help them. Does that make sense?
So I'm looking at the chat going on, but I'm actually kind of in favor of proposing the alternative of just do this for even numbered releases. So rather than do this for every release, just do it for even number releases, as a way to reduce costs and potentially, we could, to John and Costin's point, we could do more on those releases, right? We could put more things backwards to those and say, we could possibly even say our direct upgrade is only for even to even, right? Like we could make this a policy where we say, okay, the even releases are just like Linux, even releases are the ones you want if you want to do a long-term thing. Odds are for new stuff. So I don't know if other people are interested in that one, but I'd like to see that one explored.
So what's the value of releasing the other releases? Like, if even is the one we recommend people to use, what's the value have the odd release out there?
Well, we do have a fraction of our users who stay near the head, who want the latest, greatest releases all of the time, all the new features, etc. And so those users would be able to continue their existing quarterly upgrade process.
Okay, but probably a very advanced set of users, pretty rare, I would say. Most of users probably just start, going to pick the even one and be happy with it.
And I think the other thing you would see, to what Costin just said, you'll see someone like they're on an even, and then 1.11 comes out or 1.13, and it has some feature they really want. They'll go to that, but then they'll have to do another quick upgrade to 1.14, and then they can go back to staying on the longer one.
So Mitch, if I remember this discussion long back, maybe early next year, last year, I think the key was we didn't support skip version upgrades, and that's why we punted on all this discussion whether we need to do LTS on even odd or we need to just extend the window. Now that we have confirmed support for skip upgrades, I think what Sven is saying makes sense. I mean, if it reduces our burden and gives the same value to the customers.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I actually favor that model, but last time I spoke to everyone about it, it seemed that there was a lot of concern about customer confusion, which is why I changed the proposal, but I can change it back.
So my question here is, where does, so at one, let's say looking at even here, where would 110's support end? Would it be 3 months after 112?
Yes, 3 months after 112 ships.
So it would be like this picture here, except for the odd ones, it wouldn't have the extended.
Yep.
It would only be for the even ones.
Yeah, so it kind of reduces some of the concern for the product security work group, I think. It gives the long-term support and allows users to adopt the new cool features if they want. Yeah, I'm curious about it as well.
Hey, Brian, quick.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Mitch.
I was just going to say, if we're going to do that, I do like the idea of the even releases being longer. That means that our users have their upgrade windows in Q1 and Q3. I would avoid mandatory upgrades in Q4 for long-term stability users.
Mm-hmm. So, Brian, some of the concerns we had in PSWG was not just like the mechanics of patching multiple releases, but also the older a release branch gets, it's difficult to patch just because there are too many changes. So that problem doesn't go away in this approach, right?
It just reduces, right? And that we only have to do that to every other release instead of every.
Although in this model we are extending, you would have a 30-day window to do the upgrade.
A 90-day window.
Well, not with the even odd.
I don't follow. I'm sorry, Louis.
If you look at the overlap between 110 and 112 with extension.
Yes.
Right. 112 releases the beginning of Q1. Right. 110 goes out of support by the end of Q1.
Yeah,
Sorry, I can't do math. That's 90 days. I'm gonna have some more coffee.
And I think somewhere in here we defined it as 90 days, right?
Yes, it is defined as 90 days. If you look at that chart, it's a little bit off because it does show it ending before the end of Q1. Realistically, it would end as far into Q2 as 112 released into Q1.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we define it as you have a 90-day upgrade window.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We're way over time, so we should probably wrap up. But I at least would say let's look at a proposal that does the even odd and discuss if other TOC is comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with that. If you know, the PSWG should obviously make the strongest statement about whether it helps them or not, and they should think deeply about that. But if that's the case, then I'm supportive.
Yeah, same here. My only concern would be if there's a release in between that does not get a security patch, but a release before it gets it, that's a little confusing to the user, but I'm not sure that can happen. Can it?
It can with the even odd approach if we do that.
Yeah, so that's really weird.
It's the same with Ubuntu, right? Like 16.04 or whatever gets patches still, and whatever was in 17 doesn't.
Actually, I don't think that would be the case. If you look at the 110 window, 110 ends support at the same time 111 ends support.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it will happen here.
I guess technically it's not exactly the same because 111's end of support is based on the 112 release date and 110's end of support is based on the 111 release date. But as long as we stay on a fairly even quarterly cadence, it should be approximately at the same time.
Yeah, so PSWG is still patching 3 releases the way I'm seeing it. There's no way for them to get away from it.
So Miraj, sometimes it would be 2 releases, sometimes it would be 3. It depends on the time of
year. Yeah, I get it.
Right. So I think that's the kind of fundamental question is there a sufficient saving? Right, because we have to bear the organizational cost of the policy of doing things differently sometimes, right? Which that it's easy to get that kind of thing wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if we look at it, what it means is half the year you have to be patching 3, and half the year you're only patching 2. So it does cut it. It cuts it in half, the number of extra releases you have to be patching to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to assess whether that is an actual saving.
Yeah.
That saving, I've got to think about it, but does that only apply when, what am I trying to say? Does it actually reduce the load during a CVE release? Because the challenge with the product security workgroup is we've got to release all of these supported releases at the same time. But yeah, I'll go back and think about it.
Okay, so I'll circle back with the product security working group, get their feedback on the idea of an LTS TikTok sort of program. The TOC agenda is very full for the next 3 or 4 weeks with roadmaps. Would it be all right for me to schedule a follow-up meeting that is separate from the normal TOC for us to kind of close the book on this?
I think you can just be a standing agenda item in the existing TOC meeting, Mitch.
Okay.
And we'll, like, there's rarely a perfect fit. So
okay.
I think you'll probably get time in each one.
Sounds
yeah, because I think you'll want to make sure we're getting feedback from people that are not just on TOC. So
good point. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think unfortunately we're out of time.
All right. See you guys later.
Thank you.
See you all next week.